What's up, everybody? Welcome to Blood, Sweat, and Balance Sheets, the podcast where we talk about accounting technology, trends in the space, and other stuff. And today I'm very excited to talk about a little bit of all those things and our new book that we're putting out there. So technically, I'm the author of it, but had a whole lot of help putting this together. And so really excited to bring our co-author on for today's episode, Stefan Van Dijvendyk.
Nailed it.
I got the pronunciation down. We're good to go. But welcome. I know everyone's seen you before, but you want to give a little brief introduction to yourself and tell us about the book a little bit?
Sure. So my name is Stefan Van Dijvendyk. I'm the accounting operations evangelist here at Flowcast. But like Mike and many others that work here, my background's all accounting, DNA's in accounting. Did the undergraduate thing, went on to KPMG for a number of years, went to be the U.S. controller at Skull Candy, then again at Kodiak Cakes. So I've been through this route of accounting for a while and have a lot of scars and a lot of learnings from that career. Same as you've had, same as Chris has had, same as the people that work here are accountants. And so what I love about what we've done with this is we've culminated a lot of stories that I think a lot of us feel like are anecdotal to our careers and our experiences, and really proven out that, no, we actually share this experience. We actually share a lot of commonalities and a lot of similarities in the story, and we can see the shift within the industry taking place. So super excited to talk about our new book, Shift Happens.
Yes, and the operational aspect, I think, is something we've talked about a lot over the years. And for those not aware, Flowcast, we really started close management software. That's the area where we would have been introduced up front. You would have used us on the close side and then expanded over time to be more broadly operational. And I think what we saw from our clients in that transition with our product was part of the inspiration for doing the book on more broadly like accounting operations. So I'm curious, like, how have you seen things progress from your side of the table, your lens?
Yeah, well, early on in the book, and I think it might have even been in the foreword, you talk about how you saw customers hacking Flowcast to use it for other use cases, whether that was, payroll, whether that was financial reporting, whatever it was. People were using the idea of this operational idea of tracking accounting, making it more efficient, passing off work in a very clean, concise manner. And and people, you saw this hacking, you're like, oh, I can do more than just a close. A close was like the most highlighted pain point that you felt in your life, but you started seeing results and improvements in other parts of your life. It's like when, you start sleeping right and all of a sudden, like a lot of things in life start working out, but when we looked at the book, like I had a very similar experience in my career. Like we implemented Flowcast, and within weeks of using Flowcast, I was like, man, I would love to use this to just manage my AR team in its totality, not just their close work, but what are they doing day to day to make sure all the work is done. Love to use this in my procurement team. I'd love to use this for financial reporting with my FP&A team to do that handoff and everything. And so it's just funny that I think a lot of us saw the same thing kind of percolating in the marketplace at the same time. And the idea, or this idea of operational accounting, really started manifesting quite clearly, just kind of almost like across the nation, right? Because we're all in different locations and we're all kind of feeling the effects of the same thing.
Yeah. How do you define operations?
I think a lot of people look at operations from a classical business point of view, right? And they're just looking at it from, hey, this is the part of the organization that is running to make whatever product it is. So in a tech company, operations is a mix between your product team and your marketing team. But you have in most CPG companies a true operations team that's in charge of, determining how much product you need to make with that forecast, setting out the plans to produce the product, getting that product to from factory to inventory warehouses, and from warehouses all the way to the customer. And they're in charge of that whole aspect. But when we talk about operations in this book, and we talk about operational accounting, we're not talking about that part of the business, though sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. What we're talking about is operationalizing work, which is breaking it down, tracking your work in like individual steps. And what I think is most important about that is it's not just tracking it, because you never track something just to look at it. Like I don't track like I wouldn't track my height growing up like on the wall when your mom like barks you off or anything like that. But you care about the outcome. So with the intent to change what you're doing. So to me, operational accounting is measuring the abstract and tracking it when it comes to performance, with the intention to change it, right? The intention to improve it. And that's what I mean when I talk about the operational mindset and operational accounting. I don't know. Is that your take too? Is that, or am I just like esoteric off in the?
No, I think when I boil it down, I was trying to like explain this very, very succinctly. The old like, how do I explain this to a 5-year-old?
Yeah.
And operations, that's how we do stuff.
Yeah.
Like how we get stuff done. It's what operations are. And then once you document that, and to your point, we started with the close because that is arguably the biggest operational process that lives under the controller. Like that is the big one that we have to do. And so that was obviously why we focused on it. Like let's attack the big operational process. But then people started like yourself, started documenting how you do other stuff around your department, putting down, but like simply writing it down is step one.
Yeah.
And then it's about, okay, now that I understand the totality of all of our operations, how we get everything done, which once you piled up, you're like, holy crap, we do a lot of stuff around here, right? It's like the checklists get really long and the amount of folders in Flowcast can get big because accounting's complicated at the end of the day. And so once you get it documented, then it's about, okay, how do we find areas for improvement? How do we drive more efficiency and start to focus on actually getting better? But phase one is like getting your hands around everything. And that was what we saw time and time again, was just everyone being like, okay, close is the biggest thing I have to deal with. That's in Flowcast already. Let's pull in all the ancillary operational stuff into Flowcast so I have it all in one spot. And then what's really cool about the future of Flowcast is like, how can you drive more efficiency and look into those processes? And whether it's shift resources around, like reassigning work can be a really simple way to drive more efficiency within your team. Whereas an opportunity for cutting steps out of different things, or like area for technology for driving efficiency, but it's all about writing down the stuff that you do.
Yeah, and I like that. Just like if you're really boiling down for people, it's your process to do things. Like whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, it's how you do it. And
a combination one factor I kept saying, just like writing down the stuff also.
Yeah.
But it's also all of the team members and how they contribute to all those different areas. So it's like, okay, we have the stuff we do written down, but then how do I manage the team and assign the work and make sure everyone's working, in concert at the right pace to like get this work done and put the financial statements out?
Which is one of those things I think, it's when, I remember there's been multiple times where you have a discussion with someone on your team like, hey, we need resources. We want to do this, we want to do that. People are stressed and you want to help, but at the same time, you don't really have contextual understanding of like what the issue is. You're just being kind of reported what someone tells you the problem is. And it's one of those things where it's like, I want to believe you, I want to help you, but I just want to make sure that that's what's going on. And what I love about this operational mindset is the point is now we can actually look into that, right? And we can analyze that and we can say, okay, well, let's look at your team. How many processes is each person doing? Is it equitable amongst your team members? Are they getting it done in a reasonable amount of time? Or if someone's slower, is there something going on or some nuance with their work that we can figure out to see why it's more difficult for them and how to make it more equitable? And then when do we need that resource? But yeah, at its simplest form, it's like, okay, how do you do your work, and then how do we want to improve it now that we have defined what that work is? And I think that's what's important about operationalizing something is it's not just about writing it down. It's like, well, now I actually have the capabilities to change. The point is to like change and improve and have access to that. When a lot of times in my career, it's like you do feel stuck and you're just kind of like in a dark room with your eyes closed, trying to feel it around for an exit of like what is going to be the best next move to make in the team. And you don't have any insights. And I think at least me as an accountant, that's a very paralyzing feeling to have.
Totally.
Right? Because we're very data driven, very quantified, like, we're quants. We like to like make decisions based off information. And so when you're, operating your life in this non-operational way, it just like, you're just like, oh, I'm just hoping that sticks, hoping it works.
Yeah.
I don't ruin things with the team. And again, I just find it interesting that what we found in this book, bringing in a lot of other viewpoints. We have a lot of other stories from other individuals here at Flowcast and outside of Flowcast.
What were some of those common stories that came out?
I mean, we had it's like anywhere from Shivang Patel here was talking about his time at Cornerstone after you, where it was just, hey, like I have all these binders and I have all this work, but it's so hard to get visibility around what I'm doing. He's like, it's there. It is actually written down. Like he had it written down, but not in a way that was consumable, right? And I think that was a really common story we saw from people. We saw from Adam that, it's like you'd get into teams and why you enjoy maybe the heart of accounting and doing the reporting and everything. I think a lot of us enjoyed the management of working with our teams and trying to improve things, but it's so hard to do that if you can't have visibility into what's going on. But what we saw really commonly is like almost every single person that we talked to, and this wasn't, like we weren't looking for like, people that were going to agree with us necessarily on this, right? What we were seeing is like all these accountants really wanted to improve things at their companies and their teams in meaningful ways. And they knew that their traditional job of just reporting financials wasn't the way to do that. It was to get out there within the organization, both within accounting and their teams of accounting and into broader aspects of sales ops, operations, marketing, and work across the aisle to like improve processes, improve the stuff, right? And how we did the stuff.
That's a very good point. I'm going to circle back to operations outside of finance and accounting. I want to table that, but I want to go back to the Shavong story. That was such a cool one because Shavong was one of the first people we ever hired at Flowcast. He was one of our first clients. And yeah, he went from the paper tie-out binder to Flowcast and all being documented inside of Flowcast. And I remember we went back on site like a year after he started and we were filming a commercial. His boss was kind enough to do a commercial for us, and he pulls me aside and takes me to the audit room and he points to all the binders. He's like, yo, those are the last, like if you open up, he opens them, he's like, my sign-offs are right there. And those are the last binders that they had ever done before Flowcast got implemented. But that got me thinking, Sarbanes-Oxley, is the reason we have these tie-out binders and we have to do all that work and prove it for the auditors. There was a lot of process and walkthroughs and narrative thinking through Sarbanes-Oxley. And I wonder if the implementation of SOX is what started to change a little bit of the mentality away from being a number cruncher, a bean counter, and just doing that stuff versus thinking more holistically about a process and a workflow and the operations of your department. Like, I wonder if that piece of regulation ultimately changed a bit of the mindset here and is part of why we have this rise of the operational accountant.
My POV, 100% agree that Sarbanes-Oxley was critical of that, which, thank you, fraud. We'll comment at Ron for giving us this.
But the greatest gift to the accounting profession.
But what else could we want?
Yeah.
But I do think that Sarbanes-Oxley didn't come from nothing. Obviously, like COSO has been around for a long time, which is kind of the impetus of financial reporting framework and controls over that financial reporting framework. And a lot of enterprises had implemented aspects of SOX well in advance of that. What I think with SOX is it just standardized that this is something we need to do broader within businesses. This just can't just be for a couple of organizations that find it as a novel idea or a competitive edge. It really should be instrumental to all organizations. And why it took a long time for the markets to really adapt to that and understand it and educate themselves on that. And I would honestly say it took us over 10 years as a market to really understand broadly like what SOX can mean for an organization. Like some organizations very early on, early adopters understood it, but the broader market did not understand it for almost 10 years. But it did push us hard in that direction. It was really an accelerant to get us to this place of understanding that, there is an SOP that you should follow. There is an efficient way to do things. And if you do that, nothing bad should happen. It's when you deviate and you make random decisions in random ways that you open yourself up to risk. And so I do think that was a huge implication from that.
I would argue the early adopters, they didn't have it figured out. They adopted it.
Yeah.
But dude, I was in the weeds. Like my clients, it was rail to rail on how strictly you took Sarbanes-Oxley. It was like 1 year we were too loose about it. PCAOB would beat you up, and then you swing to the extreme of how you document everything and how intense you are. So it was like the early adopters, I think, were in the unfortunate position of having to just go rail to how serious it was taken by them and the auditors as well, which is a tough spot to be in.
Yeah, they had to set the trends and set the standard in a lot of ways. All we've come out with, what the PCAOB and FASB and everybody else come out with around not even just technical accounting, but Sarbanes-Oxley and reporting on Sarbanes-Oxley is there's been a lot of changes to the rules and regulations since, right? Like, the core of it's very much the same, but, management review controls became a new thing. Information produced by entity was something that no one ever considered about. Even several years after SOX, you really didn't hear about that until probably like the late thousands, I would guess.
Yep.
And then, we have different levels of management review controls. We have, there's just all these different aspects of how to test and document all this stuff. We're very new for quite a while, even though SOX had been around for more than 5 years, and we still had seen a lot of changes. So, I think even to this day, we're constantly adopting. My take is you kind of push something out. It takes the market a while to learn. And I'm not talking about accountants. It takes investors and the marketplace a while to learn what that means for them and what they're investing in an organization. And as soon as they kind of get comfortable, we push the dial a little bit further and a little bit further and want a little bit more and a little bit more. And I think that's why you see things like the climate disclosure coming out from the SEC. I think that's why you see like even broader ESG topics coming out, whether that's in Germany, California, Britain. All these places are just pushing that dial a little bit more as the markets get comfortable with, a standard or a set of information.
I actually see a little pullback on the ESG side.
Yeah, I think there's
I think it was positioned much more intensely like a year or two ago than it is today. But that's just like, we're just kicking the can on actually enforcing anything on that front seems to be the real.
Well, I mean, but you can say the same thing about SOX, right? Where the first couple of years, like, we enforced what we could, but people couldn't meet the standard immediately, right? So it's like organizations that would have been SOX compliant in 2004, 2003, 2004, then you move over into 2010, they didn't have management review controls documented in a meaningful way. They didn't have IPE documented in a meaningful way. It was a new thing. So I think that's where I go back to. It's like, we kind of put something out there, let people get comfortable with it, then we move it a little bit further. And that's what keeps accounting always interesting for the most part. It's like, we never are dealing with a very, I would say, consistent set of market dynamics, right? It's always changing on us, and that's what makes it kind of difficult. I think that's one of the reasons we've had to operationalize accounting is this is always changing on us. Our landscape is always changing on us. So we have to be dynamic in the way we execute our work, how we do that work. And so I can't just build a checklist and I run that at the company for the next 15 years. That checklist might stay the way you've written it out for 6 months at most before you're adding new tasks, you're adding new people, new ideas, because the marketplace has shifted for you.
I mean, your work is gonna change. Like there's always gonna be new operations and new efficiency to be had. I mean, even let's say the bad case, right, is like, oh, there's more regulation, we have to do more stuff. The good case is your business is doing well and you're growing and scaling and new geographies and just stuff gets harder because you have more business to be had. Yeah. That's a good thing. So I think everyone should really be not only expecting, but actually hoping that their operations changes at their company, because that means the business is doing well.
Yeah. It's like, I think that's something we discussed in the book actually is I think I call out that business is constantly evolving. If you're stagnant, if you feel like your organization's stagnant, probably not going to be around for a long time. Yeah. Like you're ripe for an overtake. Mm-hmm. And so it is good, like you're saying, Mike, that, hey, things should be changing because that means you're growing and you're challenging and you're looking to evolve as an organization, whether that's organization, i.e., office of the CFO, or that's organization, the complete enterprise. It's a good thing to see.
Could you imagine at Flowcast if we were like, no more new products, no new geographies, no new segments. We're not going to hire any new people. Like it's just we're good. Sure. We're good. It would be easier. It would be easier. Wouldn't be as fun and profitable. I'll tell you. I'll tell you that.
And honestly, I think what drives a lot of us to be at Flowcast or work on Flowcast is that new product. It's like, I'll be in these product meetings and not to get hard, go deep into our organization. I'll be in product meetings with lifelong Flowcasters. Like these people are almost double vested here, right? Yeah. Like they're like 7-8 years that they've been here, and there's still like a fire in their eyes about like, oh, we're talking about a new product and we're talking about new functionality we'll be able to. And the people are like, are we close on this?
Yep.
We're close on this. You guys aren't kidding me. We're close. And it's like, and that's what drives us at Flowcast is changing the way we do accounting. So that is something I think most of us DNA wise love here, is just like challenging that norm and changing everything. No. But as a marketer that works here now, yes, there are days when I'm like, man, it would be nice to do a launch in 2 weeks.
I got to change this messaging and there's another launch and then, we're probably going to want to relaunch it later and we got to get, that's how it goes. On that note, okay. So you were a controller before. CFO opportunity was one thing for you, but you were interested in marketing to learn about the go-to-market side of the business. Yes. And so when you look at operations and like getting outside of accounting, do you think there are areas where accountants should spend extra time on to try to get to know sales, for example, or maybe like the supply chain group or something? How do you think about getting outside of accounting and Why is that important?
I think it's an excellent question. I think it depends on what kind of vertical of organization you're working in. If you're in a tech company, if you're, I did CPG. I love CPG. If you're CPG, I really think, the first thing you need to work with is your operations team. They're the people that are really, one, they have very clear metrics behind what they're doing. Like you have data within your ERP and within your different tools to understand them. I think as accountants, we need data to understand people. We can't just talk about something and be like, oh, I get what you do in sales. Like, well, so you called a potential customer and they said yes. We struggle with those kind of notions. But yeah, I think you start by working with your operations team. If you're at a CPG company, you start by working with your sales operations team and really understanding the nuts and bolts of how they do their work and how they make their decisions. I think ultimately what we're trying to really understand is how and why you're making decisions a certain way and what data you're using to get there. And is it the most efficient way to get that data? Are we using the best data? Is that data, actually giving us good results? That type of thing. And for me, that's what I did at Skullcandy. Like the first thing I started doing because we would have, a lot of accounts will understand this, but you'll get to the end of the month and one of your close tasks will be like, do you have any orders that are just like pending out in the ether? So it's usually like stuck in your EDI feed. And it's like, did it actually ever get to the warehouse to fulfill an order? Or we recognize it, or like we just missing revenue because someone sent something in and we never pushed it to the next step. And we would clear that every month at Skullcandy. We'd go in and say like, okay, what's stuck in like our EDI feed? What's stuck in our GRIR that we haven't like shipped someplace? And there'd be, I wouldn't say always super impactful revenue, but there was like revenue on the table that was, needed to be addressed. And so you start being like, okay, well, how does this work? Like what are you guys doing to push these through? How are you identifying the issue here? You start working with your IT team on understanding how the systems connect. And then from there, you start talking to your, sales ops team, and you're trying to figure out why you have certain, product in certain locations and it's not getting to a customer, and you start understanding how they do their work. And then soon enough, you start talking to your operations team and saying, well, hey, I've been talking to the sales ops guy. They said they would do this if they had this kind of inventory where they needed it. And they're like, okay, well, here's what the struggles we're talking about. And you just kind of work your way through the organization, almost like a walkthrough when you're in public accounting on like, what are they doing and what are the decision points? How are they making those decisions? What's informing them? And it'll give you, my perspective, it gives you a much more rounded view of your financials. So when I go to answer a flux question, I'm not just answering it based off the numbers that are in the ERP for me or within whatever financial reporting tool you're using. I'm answering it based off firsthand knowledge of how decisions are made and what might have occurred. And then I'm also able to then get in front of things well before it happens. So I don't have to give the number one thing I hated as a controller was giving the CFO bad news that had nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
Right. I don't make this decision.
But
this is what happened.
Don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah. Like you get on the wall and you're like, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
And so you start working with individuals to kind of get in front of those issues, figuring out where accounting can help, maybe where things you've learned in accounting can help. And again, these are stories we saw, not just from me. It's like you have these stories, Shalong had these stories, Adam had these stories. We saw it from numerous people and numerous customers that had this same anecdotal story, which then proves out that like, no, this is actually a movement of what's occurring within the marketplace.
Yeah.
When I came to Flowcast, one of my, I've always liked to work at companies that I like actually enjoy the product. It's a lot easier.
That is a theme of yours. It's very, very. By the way, had some Kodiak cakes for the first time.
Legit?
My daughter, they're very good. My daughter loves them.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
The cups, the to-go cups, the plain flapjack to-go cup is quite tasty. And I'm not 100% on this because I haven't seen it at the store myself, but I heard news that perhaps their cookie came back. They have like a whole grain cookie that is like, I couldn't buy it. I would make them for myself, and I would just tell my fiance like, no, they're flapjacks. I swear, they're like, you're just flipping a cookie off the sheet.
I think your strategy of working at companies where you genuinely enjoy the product is brilliant for what it's worth. Like advice for people on the line. It's very smart. Yes.
Yeah. And for part of it, it's like, I had some opportunities to become a CFO after Kodiak Cakes, but one of the things, I think everybody faces imposter syndrome at some point in time in their life. I think accountants face it a lot in their life is, it's like I felt very confident about operation, obviously accounting. I felt very confident about accounting, felt confident about finance. I felt very confident in operations and sales operations. but I never really understood, in particular, the marketing business cycle and how that related into, decision making, what information they're using, what your go to market and everything. And it's different for consumer goods versus technology. But it's one of those things where, like, if I want to be as effective of a CFO as I can be as a controller, then I need to ingrain myself more in that part of the organization. And me personally, the time isn't to do that as a CFO, right? Like that is, you have shifting priorities, or you've shifted your priorities from what you should be doing as a CFO to learning things that really aren't under your purview. So to me, I wanted to learn that in advance. And that's why, I came to Flowcast and enjoyed learning more about the marketing and sales cycle. And it is very enlightening to see it. It's very different in technology, but it's very, very enlightening to see that, for any accountants that don't believe this, like marketers do use a ton of information to make their decision. They try to source it and they try to corroborate it. And there's a lot of nuance to it. And it's not as like qualitative, touchy-feely fun as it like always looks to be.
Yeah.
Because I think, I always would look across the aisle and be like, they sure are having a lot of fun over there today. Especially at Skullcandy. I mean, they ran amazing events and created, like, they had an amazing, and Kodiak Cakes as well, but just their marketing department always just had like a good energy about them. And you're like, what? How do they do that over there? And so it's fun to kind of be on the other side and be like, okay, this is, it's not just they're throwing things to the wall and they're happening to stick. They're making strategic decisions to execute on this larger marketing.
Yeah, marketing is very much a group where I think accountants have their stereotypes about it, and it's that I felt the exact same way starting Flowcast. But as you learn more about it, it's way too much to just call it marketing. Marketing is like 5 sub-disciplines within that, and there are experts within each one. And some is qualitative, some is quantitative, but like it all has to come together to work well. And so back to operations, and then even beyond that, marketing is then cross-functional across the company. Like you're working more broadly. It's not insular. And so I think,
yes,
so you took the extreme stance of let me actually go work in that to learn more about it. Yeah. Let's say someone doesn't want to leave their role in accounting, but they want to get those skills. Any advice on how they could start to learn more of that?
I think it's the same. It's the same way we do it with our own job. Like what I've learned is it's all about going back to the idea of that operational mindset is figuring out how they are making their decisions and what decisions they are making. So figuring out how they're doing their stuff and what is impacting how they do their stuff, I think is what drives the most insight into anybody doing anything. It's like we all lack perception of and communication. Like, and we call this out in the books, like the 2 biggest issues I personally see in organizations is struggle with communication. And I don't think it's a lack of communication. I think it's just a general struggle of communication and a lack of, or a struggle with perception where, we only see from our angle or our lens, and it's really hard to kind of shift to other mindsets. And if you don't understand the other person perception wise, you're going to have a hard time communicating with them to get to an effective decision or to an effective outcome. So work with your marketing team and say, again, just like a walkthrough, if you have time, be like, hey, show me how you're figuring out what you want to spend on ad dollars for YouTube. Let's say, okay, this is how I make that decision, and this is how I figure out how much budget to spend. Okay, show me how you figure out how much ad spend to do on Amazon, right? Or how much to do on LinkedIn posts. For us, it would be like a LinkedIn post or a Google search or whatever it is, SEO, and have that conversation and really get into the heart with them. And I think you'll find like most marketers are very happy to have that discussion, are very competent in having that discussion. And you'll realize that like they use as much data they can to aim. It's like, a big ship with a small rudder. They're like I can only do so much, but I'm going to do what I can. And it can be really enlightening to kind of do that. So I highly recommend getting involved with them that way from the budget lens and say like, hey, not here to attack your budget, not here to say you spent it inefficiently. I just want to understand how you figure out how much you need to spend.
Yeah.
And then when you get to things like explaining why you're over under maybe in advertising on your financial statement line items for your, board report at the end of the month, you actually can have a quick, easy conversation with your marketing team as to what you're going to put in that BVA, right? Like that budget to actual is a lot easier to have if you have that contextual understanding. You're not just, because what you generally see is you have to put in harsh or hard news in that BVA, and then marketing's feeling attacked and they don't want to work with you, and then you don't want to work with them. So go from that level of understanding there, and I think you'll be a lot more effective.
Yeah. And I would also recommend having it be informal, soft conversations. Like, now that I've learned what I've learned at Flowcast, if I put myself back in let's say I were a controller, I would be trying really hard to get to the highest level person in any given department and just have an informal, like, if I go to the CMO, be like, hey, I'm just curious, tell me about your organization. Like, what's the org chart like? What does everyone do? Like, how do you think about it? And just open it up. I think a lot of people are willing to have that conversation if you come from an angle of just pure curiosity. I would have learned so much about marketing had I been able to go to the CMO at Cornerstone and be like, tell me about marketing. Like, I would have learned that product marketing is a thing. I would have learned that demand generation is a thing. You have brand, you have communications, just like how nuanced it gets. And I feel like even just knowing baseline how the org chart is structured, then when you're looking at other things, you know, if you're like, oh, we didn't hit our revenue target, you can start to look at like, oh, well, why is that? Oh, yeah. You know, maybe there weren't enough demos that came in. Oh, maybe our demand gen function isn't doing so well. And so should I think about how do we allocate dollars there? And you really do need to understand the org chart as well. So I'd recommend layering up. And I think keeping that conversation as far away from budget and dollars and everything as possible is how you get the most like neutral discussion.
Yeah.
From I'm trying to learn. I'm curious, like, hey, I want to be a CFO one day. I would love to know more about just how the whole company runs. Would you humor me and spend an hour lunch where you tell me all about your organization? And
yeah,
that's it.
And I will say this, like, marketing, Mike has hinted at this. Marketing is a bunch of different functions chasing at very different things that then have to come back together into like one go-to-market like momentum. So it's like comms chases after creating awareness in its own way. Demand Gen is creating it in their own way, partnerships in their own way. And they're all really look like disparate processes, but they all do come together at the same goal, which is revenue generation and market presence. But it is a complicated beast. And I think the other thing to think about this is like, you know, I didn't want to learn necessarily about marketing for the sake of just knowing marketing. You want to know about your different your different teams and departments within an organization so that you can figure out how you can help and impact them. So, you know, it could be that marketing is making kind of shooting in the dark in a certain area because they simply don't have data there. And it could be that they don't have information. It could be we have data in multiple different sources, but we haven't compiled it together, that being, you know, finance and IT, compiled it into a way that they have useful information to make decisions off of. And they might not know how to interact with you to get what they need. So they're like, oh, I just assume I had to operate with blinders. And it's like,
right.
No, we can help you. We're meant to help you. We're here to help you. And because we don't have good perception and visibility into what they do, we can't. So both sides are just operating this idea that's like, well, we've done what we can. Well, that's really not true. You know, we've had partners that we worked before that do, you know, transformation projects for different customers. And one of the things we've talked about with some of their senior leadership is when we talk about data in an organization, financial reporting data is a relatively like limited subset of the overall data that a company actually contains and has to make decisions off of. And as accountants, we've really mastered how to structure and execute and report on financial information. So how do we then take that same skill set into the broader organization, into the broader set of data for the organization to be impactful? And this is something that, again, we talk about in the book is the idea of this shift isn't necessarily, you know, hey, we think that you just need to get into operations for the sake of operations. It's, you know, we have a desire and there is a need in organizations for people to come in and fulfill this role of helping us pull the strings together. And as accountants, because we do very iterative work, we're very highly standardized in the way we do our reporting and process, we have a unique training and skill set to then help other organizations where they have a unique skill set in other areas that could maybe help us once we start reaching across the aisle.
Mm-hmm. I love it. To me, I hope the future of accounting is really moving in that direction, more cross-functional, thinking about the broader business. Maybe it's just me, but that seems more interesting as well than what we're doing. And you can have like a really big impact by driving efficiency more broadly.
Well, and to your point, it's not just you. Like this was a common theme in all the stories. And again, it goes to,
at what point do enough anecdotes pile up to be statistical evidence? That's
a great question. I've thought about different points in my life. Like I should just go back and get like a master's in some kind of like like business statistics or something just so I can actually answer that question. But I think when you find, like we've probably interviewed over 30 people for the book. We don't include all 30, but we probably interviewed over 30 people for the book. And in that, we saw this theme in every instance. So at that point in time, you have a statistical population because again, we're not just talking to, Flowcasters. We're talking to people that don't even use Flowcast.
Yeah. You're
accountants that have places that have nothing to do with Flowcast. And they're like, I feel the same way.
You've been on the conference circuit long enough at this point. It's like you go to these conferences, you meet a ton of accountants, and we have customers, prospects, partners, everyone, and you hear the same things over and over again. It's like, I don't need a survey to know that this is the reality within accounting. I've heard enough anecdotes to where it is what it is, and you hear it across size of companies, like vertical of company, all the different industries. It's just so common.
Your trade groups say the same thing. AICPA, your local state agencies, your universities, your professors, they're all saying, well, accounting's this strategic instrument within the organization. And they've been touting that for years. And I think we're finally at the point where that's coming to fruition. I do think for decades that's been a lie. I don't think that's actually been true. But I think a space at the table has opened up, a vacuum at the table, so to speak, and accounting makes the most natural sense to step up to that plate and help out with that, kind of that strategic need within the organization.
Yep. And it's, I would say in large part because we're always the busiest people at a company as well. And what is it if you want something done quickly, give it to the busiest person that you have. So I feel like that's accounting's next job, is driving that sense of urgency and efficiency across the entire organization.
I may or may not have had an accounting manager who liked to give one of the owners of the company a hard time every time they left at 4:35. She was like, "Oh, bye, have a nice evening." Because we would stay and work late, because it wouldn't just be during the close. It'd be all month long.
Yeah.
She'd be like, "Hey, have a good night."
Our, I don't want to name names. One of the CFOs that I worked for in my career across audit or industry, I don't want to name names, but we'd be there late. The guy had a secret back door out of his office, and he would always leave out of the back door so he didn't have to walk past us.
The awkwardness
on the way out, because you got the auditors and the whole team there real late working hard. And meanwhile, he's ducking out.
Yeah.
Ducking through the back. So we didn't love it so much as the people grinded away. But all right, on the note of working late, let's wrap this up with some closing remarks. So recap of key insights here. Can you give us some more info on where we can find the book, all that good stuff?
The book is on the Amazon Kindle store. You can go there and download it. If you're a current customer, perhaps we have a few that we could send you if you want to give us a call, but only if I really like you. No, the Amazon's it's on Amazon Kindle. It's really easy to consume. I'm hoping to one day convince Mike to do an Audible version of it. Have him read all 300 pages.
It's not going to happen.
When we look at the book and the key insights, again, what we're really sharing here is this idea that, it's a culmination of stories that really go towards this idea that, accountants are doing this within organizations, and you can do this too within your organization. It's probably not all that different from what you're doing today to operationalize. It's just more or less recognizing the tasks that you're doing and taking action and making it more iterative, and hoping that you can drive that change within your organization as others have driven within theirs. One cool thing we have going on with this book is we've actually made a Flowcademy course around it. So if you haven't heard about Flowcademy, this is our educational platform here at Flowcast, which is simply for education of this industry. That's how much Mike and Chris and Colin and the board believe in education. Is we are providing you a platform to learn from, and we're not charging you for it, right? It's free access to the CPE. And so we created a series of CPE questions around this book, so you can actually read this book and get CPE for the year, which is pretty great. I don't think a lot of people, I don't know if anybody else really offers something like that. That was a really novel concept when someone proposed that. So we have 80 questions to get in there. We can get you some CPE hours as well. So that's check out Flowcademy. Also, just for the fact that Flowcademy is also just really cool.
So Flowcademy's on. Yeah, it's a passion. It's a passion project of ours. It's awesome.
It's hot.
I recommend. How many hours do you get for reading the book and answering the questions?
I think you get 10 hours.
Nice.
It's quite a few.
That's good.
And you know, it's
And
a hardy book.
I really like but I like the approach with the stories, and it's like reading stories is a lot easier than just reading a boring textbook. And so it's an easier read. You hear what the humans are meant to consume stories, not boring words on a page. And so recommend it. So 300 pages, but hopefully not a difficult.
No, there's a lot of other fluff in there to like, you know, like images and stuff like that to help you out. But
picture book.
It's I mean, if it was me, it would have to be a picture book so I could read it. But no, it has some really good stuff. And like I said, the stories are really interesting. There's some good takes. And you know, you got the name, and you know, I'd honestly recommend, like, if you see something interesting there, like reach out to myself on LinkedIn, like reach out to us at Flowcast. Like, this is something that we're passionate about regardless of the technology. Like, we want all of you to like change the way you're doing your work and to live in this better future state. And the only way to do that is if we really get market momentum behind it. So come join us on that, get some free CPE credit hours in there, and we should be able to rock.
Well said. I don't want to add to it and ruin it, so we're going to end it there. Great job, Stefan. Thank you so much for your help on the book. It was awesome. I really appreciate it, and thanks for joining today.
Yeah, who would have known we'd have our name on a book one day, Mike?
Not me.
Not me. Thanks, guys.